The factory whistle cuts through the pre-dawn darkness as Edward and Mary wake in their single rented room in Whitechapel. This is 1880 London, and reaching age 65 together is an achievement that defies the brutal mathematics of Victorian working-class life. Their survival past retirement age, making them anomalies in a world where most workers die before 50. The waking happens slowly and painfully. Edward's lungs damaged from 40 years breathing coal dust in a metalworks factory. Mary's spine curved from decades hunched over a sewing machine. The simple act of standing requiring minutes of careful movement and suppressed coughing fits. The room is a fourth-floor walk-up, 10 feet by 12 feet, no running water, no heat except what the tiny coal stove provides when they can afford fuel. The walls damp with mold, the single window looking onto a courtyard that never sees sunlight. No pension exists for factory workers. Edward was dismissed at 60 when his productivity declined. Mary lost her seamstress position at 58 when her eyesight faded, their income now depending on whatever casual labor they can find and charity they can access. Morning begins with counting coins. The rent is 4 shillings weekly, due tomorrow. They have 3 shillings and 8 pence. The shortfall, meaning potential eviction, homelessness at their age being death sentence, the arithmetic of poverty allowing no mistakes. Dressing happens in layers despite the cold. Edward pulling on the same shirt he's worn for 3 weeks. His single pair of trousers held up with rope. Mary's dress being patched so many times the original fabric barely shows. Their clothing being everything they own, besides a blanket and 2 tin cups. The shared privy is 5 floors down. The trip requiring careful navigation of rotting stairs and darkness. The facility being a hole over a cesspit shared by 40 residents. The smell being overwhelming, sanitation being non-existent, disease spreading through the building like wildfire. Breakfast doesn't happen. Food requiring money they need for rent, the gnawing hunger being familiar. Their last meal being yesterday's charity soup, the next one being uncertain. Starvation being slow process measured in weeks. The building houses dozens of elderly poor, widows, disabled workers, couples like Edward and Mary, all clinging to survival's edge, some dying quietly in their rooms, bodies sometimes not discovered for days, death being routine event barely noticed. Edward's cough is worsening, 40 years of metal dust coating his lungs, the shortness of breath increasing monthly, no medical treatment being affordable or available, the progression being inevitable, tubercular consumption claiming most factory workers eventually. Mary's hands shake from palsy, the tremor making fine work impossible, her sewing skills useless, the condition worsening yearly, no treatment existing, the helplessness being psychological torture for someone whose hands were her livelihood. If you think aging is hard today, wait until you see what reaching 65 meant on these Victorian streets. What we're revealing today completely changes how you view references to the elderly in historical accounts. Their children provide minimal help. 1 daughter in service sending a shilling monthly when she can. 2 sons dead from workplace accidents. Another daughter who married and moved to Manchester, whose letters stopped coming years ago. Family support being unreliable. The grandchildren are scattered, some in workhouses, others in service, a few emigrated to America seeking opportunities London denies, the family being fragmented by economic necessity, gatherings being impossible when survival requires geographic dispersal. Winter is approaching, fuel costs rising, temperatures dropping, bronchitis season beginning, elderly dying in their rooms from cold and hunger, spring always revealing how many didn't survive, their survival depending on luck and whatever charity they can access. Their survival strategy requires daily hustle. Edward seeking any casual labor his body can manage, Mary begging at church steps, both swallowing pride that poverty demolished years ago, dignity being luxury they cannot afford. The physical decline is comprehensive. Edward's hearing nearly gone, Mary's vision dimming beyond what cheap spectacles can correct, both experiencing chronic pain from decades of repetitive labor, teeth long gone, mobility decreasing monthly. Morning light brings Edward to the docks, seeking casual labor loading cargo, younger men getting hired first, his age and health making him last choice, standing for hours, hoping for a few hours' work, the humiliation being daily occurrence. The foreman occasionally takes pity, assigning him light sorting work, paying 6 pence for 4 hours, the money being crucial but inadequate, the physical toll being severe, his lungs burning from exertion his body can't sustain. Mary walks to the East End markets, collecting discarded vegetables, picking through refuse bins for anything salvageable, competing with younger beggars, the scraps supplementing their diet, shame being a motion they can't afford. The charitable soup kitchen opens at noon, Mary waiting in line with hundreds of other desperate poor, the watery broth and stale bread being free, the sermon about moral improvement being price of admission, listening being easier than starving. The volunteers are middle-class ladies, their condescension barely hidden, lecturing about thrift and cleanliness to people who own nothing and have no access to bathing facilities, their advice being useless, but accepting it being required for food. Edward returns exhausted by afternoon. Sixpence earned, coughing blood into a rag he hides from Mary, knowing what the blood means, knowing the progression, knowing no treatment exists even if they could afford it. The afternoon finds Mary at the church, requesting assistance from the parish relief, filling out forms she can barely read, proving destitution, the means testing being humiliating, the relief if granted being minimal, pride being casualties of poverty. The vicar questions their worthiness, asking why children don't support them, implying moral failure led to their poverty. The Victorian belief that destitution reflects character defects being standard, deserving versus undeserving poor being distinguished through interrogation. The parish grants 2 shillings weekly, barely enough to supplement their income to survival level, the amount being calculated to prevent starvation but ensure misery, compassion being rationed, punishment for poverty being policy. Begging is sometimes necessary. Mary standing outside theaters where wealthy patrons exit, the few pennies given buying bread, the rejection being common, kindness being rare, survival depending on strangers' occasional generosity. The workhouse looms as constant threat, the option of last resort, couples being separated by gender, conditions being deliberately harsh to discourage applicants, entering meaning abandoning all dignity, but also meaning survival when all else fails. Edward refuses to consider the workhouse, preferring death on the streets to separation from Mary after 45 years together, the pride being irrational but deeply held, maintaining agency over their circumstances being psychological necessity. The pawn shop knows them well, their wedding rings pawned and redeemed repeatedly, a blanket being pawned last month, the pawnbroker offering less each time, their possessions dwindling, soon having nothing left to trade. Late afternoon brings them together in their room, comparing the day's earnings and findings, calculating whether they can make rent, the mathematics rarely working in their favor, the anxiety being constant companion. The building's other residents share survival strategies, which churches give most generously, which markets discard the best refuse, which policemen ignore beggars versus which arrest them. The knowledge network among the elderly poor being essential. A neighbor died last night, found in her room this morning, dead 3 days based on the smell, the body being removed to Potter's Field, her few possessions being claimed by the landlord for unpaid rent, her life ending in anonymity. Evening brings no relief from worry. The rent shortfall remains unsolved, eviction meaning sleeping in the streets, Edward's age and health making that impossible to survive, the deadline approaching with no solution visible. Leave your like if this unflinching look at Victorian aging is destroying any romantic notions about this era's treatment of the elderly. The gas lamps flicker on outside, the weak light barely penetrating their window, illumination inside coming from a candle stub saved for emergencies, darkness being their constant companion, fuel for light and heat being beyond their means. Mary mends their clothes by candlelight, patching holes with fabric salvaged from rags, her shaking hands making the work difficult, the necessity overcoming the difficulty, their appearance affecting whether they receive charity, respectability being performed despite poverty. Edward counts their coins again, hoping the mathematics will somehow change, the same 3 shillings 8 pence mocking him. The rent collector coming tomorrow, no miracle appearing to solve the deficit. A knock at the door brings terror, expecting the landlord demanding rent, but instead, their daughter Ellen appearing unexpectedly, her quarterly visit being unscheduled, the surprise bringing hope and anxiety simultaneously. Ellen works as a housemaid, her employer allowing her 1 afternoon monthly. She's brought a small parcel of food and 1 shilling, the gift being significant sacrifice from her tiny wages, the help being insufficient but desperately appreciated. The conversation is strained. Ellen asking why they don't try harder, suggesting they could find better work, not understanding that age and health eliminate options, the generational gap being vast, youth unable to comprehend old age's realities. She stays only an hour, needing to return before curfew, promising to visit again soon, the promise being sincere, but circumstances making it uncertain, the goodbye being painful, the solitude returning when she leaves. The shilling brings their total to 4 shillings 8 pence. Enough for rent with pennies remaining, the crisis averted temporarily, next week's rent being future problem, survival being measured in weekly intervals, long-term planning being impossible luxury. The lodging house grows quiet as night falls, residents retiring early because there's nothing else to do, no money for entertainment, no energy for socializing, survival consuming all resources, joy being distant memory. Mary and Edward huddle under their single blanket, sharing body heat, the intimacy being practical, not romantic, though affection persists despite hardship. 45 years together creating bonds poverty cannot sever completely. The conversation turns to memories. Their wedding in 1835, the children when they were small, better times when Edward had steady work, the past being refuge from present misery, nostalgia being free entertainment. Plans are made for tomorrow. Edward will try the docks again. Mary will visit a different church for charity, the routine being established through necessity, variation being impossible when options are so limited. Sleep comes despite hunger and cold, exhaustion overcoming discomfort, the ability to sleep in adverse conditions being skill developed over decades, rest being essential for tomorrow's survival efforts. Dreams sometimes bring escape. Edward dreaming of the countryside of his youth, Mary dreaming of when children were home, both waking to reality being cruel return, consciousness bringing renewed awareness of their circumstances. The night brings sounds of the city, drunks shouting in the street, a baby crying somewhere in the building, rats scratching in the walls, the police whistle blowing during a street disturbance, the noise being constant urban soundtrack. Edward's coughing worsens in the night, blood being unmistakable now, Mary pretending not to notice in the darkness, both knowing what it means, speaking it aloud, making it too real. Denial being protective mechanism. Morning arrives with fog so thick, visibility is measured in feet. The famous London pea soup smog combining coal smoke and moisture, Edward's breathing becoming labored immediately, the polluted air being hazard for damaged lungs. Share in the comments. Could you have maintained hope in these circumstances? Or would the grinding poverty and physical decline have destroyed your will to continue? The rent is paid. Edward walking carefully down the stairs, handing 4 shillings to the landlord, the receipt being precious documentation, eviction being delayed another week, the cycle continuing endlessly. The remaining coins buy bread, a small loaf being divided carefully, rationed to last 2 days. The portions being inadequate, but stretching resources being essential. Hunger being permanent condition. Edward heads to the docks despite the fog. The conditions making work less likely, but necessity overriding caution. Standing in the hiring crowd, being passed over repeatedly. Younger, healthier men being chosen first. Mary visits the dispensary requesting medicine. The free clinic being overcrowded, waiting hours to see a doctor. The physician being overworked and dismissive, prescribing nothing because Edward's condition is terminal. Palliative care being unavailable for the poor. The diagnosis is confirmed. Tubercular consumption advanced, perhaps months remaining. No treatment being effective or affordable. The doctor suggesting he make peace with God. Medical care ending where ability to pay ends. Mary doesn't tell Edward the diagnosis, protecting him from certainty, allowing hope to persist, the kindness being her gift when she has nothing material to give, the secret being heavy burden. A settlement house opens offering services, free classes, warm rooms, charitable assistance, Mary visiting to investigate, the middle-class reformers being genuinely concerned but condescending, their understanding of poverty being theoretical, not experiential. The Salvation Army provides a meal, requiring attendance at religious service first, the evangelizing being tolerated for the food, conversion being unlikely but performance being easy, survival requiring swallowing pride repeatedly. Evening brings Edward home empty-handed, no work being found, the day being wasted standing in the cold, his health being further damaged for no gain, the frustration being palpable, his sense of worth being eroded by unemployment. An altercation with a neighbor erupts, a dispute over noise, the confined conditions creating friction, tempers being short when everyone is hungry and desperate, the argument being resolved by the landlord threatening eviction to both parties. The settlement house visit yields assistance, a voucher for coal, a blanket being provided, the charity being welcomed despite the strings attached, the warmth being literal lifesaver as temperatures drop. A letter arrives from their son in America, sent months ago, reaching them through complicated forwarding, containing no money but news of his success, the mixed feelings being complex, pride and abandonment mixing. The evening meal is thin soup, made from bones begged from a butcher, scraps of vegetables, the warmth being as valuable as the minimal nutrition, the ritual of eating together maintaining normalcy despite circumstances. Winter deepens its grip, temperatures dropping below freezing, the coal voucher being precious, rationing fuel to make it last, survival becoming day-to-day calculation, spring seeming impossibly distant. Edward's condition deteriorates visibly, his coughing fits becoming more frequent, his appetite disappearing, his strength fading noticeably, the progression being undeniable. Mary watching helplessly as death approaches. Stand on a Whitechapel corner as gas lamps flicker through the fog, understanding that Edward and Mary's survival past 65 makes them statistical anomalies, that most Victorian workers died decades younger, that aging in poverty meant suffering without dignity or hope. This wasn't Golden Age retirement. No pension existing for workers, no health care, no social safety net, survival depending on family support that was often unavailable. Charity being inadequate and condescending, dignity being first casualty of poverty. The Victorian elderly poor faced impossible choices between pride and survival, between staying together and accessing institutional care, between begging and starving, every option being degrading, no good choices existing. Yet resilience persisted despite horror. Edward and Mary maintaining their bond, finding small joys, helping neighbors when possible, humanity surviving dehumanizing conditions, the spirit proving harder to crush than the body. Their story represents millions of unnamed elderly, working lives spent in factories and workshops, bodies destroyed by labor, savings being impossible on poverty wages, old age bringing destitution, suffering being mass phenomenon hidden from comfortable classes. The workhouse system was deliberately cruel, conditions made harsh to discourage use, couples separated, dignity stripped, the philosophy being that poverty reflected moral failure requiring punishment, compassion being rationed to deserving few. Reform movements were beginning. Booth's poverty surveys documenting the scale of suffering, settlement houses providing services, the Fabian Society advocating for pensions, change coming slowly, too late for current elderly, but eventually transforming the system. The Old Age Pensions Act of 1908 came too late for Edward. He died in 1882, 2 years after our story. Mary survived until 1910, receiving the 5-shilling weekly pension for her final months, the small sum representing revolutionary change. Modern welfare states emerged from Victorian horrors, the suffering being documented, the injustice being recognized, pensions and health care and housing support being created, the improvements being hard-won through decades of advocacy and political struggle. The photographs from this era tell truths. Elderly faces showing exhaustion and resignation, bodies bent from labor, clothing in rags, the visual record contradicting any romantic Victorian nostalgia, poverty being undeniable in images. Edward and Mary's specific story is constructed but typical, their experiences reflecting documented realities, their struggles being multiplied by hundreds of thousands, individual names being lost, but collective suffering being recorded. The Victorian economy created these conditions, industrial capitalism requiring cheap disposable labor, workers being used until broken, then discarded, profit being prioritized over human welfare, the elderly bearing the costs of others' enrichment. Some elderly were better off, those with family wealth, those who owned property, those whose children succeeded, class being determinant of old age experience, Mary and Edward representing the majority, not the exceptions. The churches provided inadequate charity, the scale of poverty overwhelming voluntary efforts, religious institutions offering comfort but unable to address systemic causes, faith being psychological support when material support failed. Which aspect of Victorian life should we explore next? What childhood was like in the workhouses these elderly feared, or how the middle classes lived in comfort while workers suffered? Leave your vote below. You've witnessed the brutal reality of aging in Victorian poverty, understood that reaching old age meant suffering, not security, seen that the celebrated Victorian era was nightmare for those who built its prosperity through their labor. History reveals that progress is never inevitable, that human suffering can be policy, not accident. And sometimes the most beautiful eras concealed systematic cruelty toward those who actually made them possible through their work and sacrifice.